And Russia is facing severe sanctions by Western allies after Moscow invaded Ukraine in early hours yesterday. In the biggest assault by a state since the end of the Second World War it was, and European Union imposed 5-pronged economic sanctions against Russia after this. It has targeted its financial, energy and transport sectors. EU will freeze Russian assets in the bloc and halt its banks' access to European financial markets, targeting 70% of Russian banking markets as well. The sanctions also target state-owned companies, including those in the field of defense. It proposes adding 2 Russian private banks to sanctioned entities list. Russians prohibited from depositing over $1.12 million in EU banks as well. Europe imposes measures that will increase Russian borrowing costs. It will raise inflation and gradually erode Russian industrial base. European Union has banned sale of aircraft spare parts to Russian airlines, thus degrading one of Russia's key sector and connectivity. It has also limited Russian access to crucial technology and suspended all Russian diplomatic visas as well.
Have maximum impact on the Russian economy and the political elite, and it is built of 5 pillars. The first is the financial sector, second the energy sector, the third is the transport sector, fourth are export controls and the ban of export financing, and finally visa policy. Let me highlight some of the most important points.
The EU has decided to hold off from cutting Moscow off from SWIFT, the global interbank payment system it is. All the US and its allies have confirmed that they are not taking SWIFT sanctions off the table, as Britain and others call for imposing additional sanctions. Meanwhile, French President Macron batted for keeping dialogue open with Kremlin at the EU summit today. Macron said while sanctions remain useful, adding that France will be rolling out additional sanctions. It remained useful to leave the path for dialogue open for cessation of hostilities. Macron was the only Western leader to speak to Putin after Russia invaded its pro-West neighbor.
Et ensuite, tout en condamnant, tout en sanctionnant, tout en continuant à décider et agir, de laisser ce chemin ouvert pour que le jour où les conditions pourront être remplies, nous puissions obtenir une cessation des hostilités pour les Ukrainiennes et pour les Ukrainiens.
Berlin has put Nord Stream 2 certification on ice. Remember, the pipeline project is already complete and runs from Russia to Germany. It was awaiting regulatory approval by EU and German authorities. Before Russian aggression against Ukraine, US imposed sanctions against company in charge of building the gas pipeline as well. Canada has also announced sanctions against Kremlin, calling Putin's move barbaric. PM Trudeau announced sanctions against 62 individuals and entities, targeting major banks and members of the government. Canada is also cancelling all export permits following Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Russia must immediately cease all hostile actions against Ukraine and withdraw all military and proxy forces from the country. Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be respected, and the Ukrainian people, like all people, must be free to determine their own future.
And the UK has announced unprecedented sanctions against Kremlin as well. PM Johnson unveiled largest ever package of sanctions against Russia, targeting not only banks and financial institutions, but also individuals, including Kirill Shamalov, Putin's one son-in-law. While America rolled out robust sanctions targeting Moscow's financial system, blocking assets of large Russian banks and business oligarchs, and imposing export controls aimed to hurt its high-tech needs. Japan also imposed sanctions targeting Russian financial institutes after G7 leaders agreed to penalize Moscow over Ukrainian invasion. Japan will impose now penalties targeting semiconductor exports and suspend visa issuance to Russian individuals and organizations. World's third largest economy, Japan is also planning to freeze assets of Russian financial institutions.
国際社会の懸命の努力にもかかわらず行われた今回のロシア軍によるウクライナへの侵攻は力による一方的な現状変更の試みであり、ウクライナの 主権と領土の一体性を侵害する明白な国際法違反です。国際秩序の根幹を揺るがす行為として断じて許容できず、厳しく非難します。
Russia launched an all-out invasion of Ukraine by land, air and sea yesterday, the largest assault that Europe has seen since the Cold War. So what is at cost in this war? Well, in this crisis, Ukraine is the biggest loser. The talk of war was already costing Ukraine's economy $3 billion a month. According to reports, since the beginning of the crisis, national currency has steadily lost value. Ukraine says around $12.5 billion have been withdrawn from accounts in the country. Members of parliament and businessmen are fleeing the country as well. So the impact on its economy could have long-standing consequences, one that the West is trying to neutralize with aids and loans. As for Russia, it is a top oil and natural gas producer. The most effective way to target Russia with sanctions is to cut off its supply of oil and natural gas to the West. Other ways include excluding Russia from SWIFT. It's a global banking system, banning Russia from using the dollar, blacklisting banks and sanctioning its oligarchs. While all these sanctions could cripple Russia's economy, it will also hurt the West as well. It could mean higher energy costs for both America and Europe. Currently, oil prices surged past $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014 yesterday, and even Russia does not want oil to get pricier either. Russia's inflation is currently at 8%. A further increase in price of oil will push up prices in other sectors. As for the rest of the world, it means more disruptions, more supply chain problems and more market volatility and even more oil price hikes. Russia is a major exporter of rare earth minerals used in airplanes and converters. Ukraine is a major source of neon as well, used in making semiconductors. Now, both countries also produce major quantities of fertilizers. So it is safe to say what happens in Ukraine will impact all parts of the world financially and economically as well. WION now available in your country. Download the app and get all the news on the move.